Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of RPG Radio. My name is Winback, and on today's video we're going to be looking at the grand finale of the Doom Deceiver build. This is part 4 in the series, and if you haven't checked out the first 3 parts, go back and see what's up with those guys, because they are going to get you through your first 50 levels and all the way through the elite difficulty with the most important parts of your gear, your abilities, your devotions, and all that fun stuff mixed in together. This video is predominantly going to be focused on your endgame gear, your endgame components for maxing out your resistances, and augments as well to fill in the slots where those components can't get your resistances up over 80%. When you are in the ultimate difficulty, you are getting a lot of your resistances taken right off the top from you, so it's really important that you have these things to stay alive. But without further ado, let's talk all about big cool gear that you get to pick up in the ultimate difficulty. The first piece of gear that I am going to mention to you is a carryover from the very last part of last week's video, but I think it's very important. Mainly because I don't have a mythical version for the Wrath of Tenebris just yet, but even the elite version is doing a hell of a lot of damage, and compared to a lot of the other contemporary options in Ultimate as far as farming goes, the elite difficulty version of the Wrath of Tenebris, which is just the basic one, is still extremely good. Wrath of Tenebris is going to give you a baseline chaos damage buff, which is going to add base damage to your chaos. You're going to turn 12 to 16% of your attack damage into health, so it's got lifesteal on it, and it is going to give you a very big bump in your chaos damage overall. So you're going to get another 200 to 300% increased on top of everything that you already accrued through the game. It's also converting lightning damage to chaos damage, so if you were finding lightning damage gear throughout the game that you ended up liking, you could have that converting into your main damage type for the ultimate difficulty. Not to say that I found anything that I particularly enjoyed to make use of that stat, but you never know. Some people find some different stuff. We also get flat health bonuses, a big chunk of offensive ability, and some attack speed for all of our passive stats. But more importantly than all of those things, except maybe the chaos damage, is going to be your plus 3 points into Doombolt, followed by another plus 2 points into all the skills in the occultist tree. That is a whopping 5 points that you will get into Doombolt, which is your main damage ability with this build. So, if I haven't beaten it to death yet, as cool as the Wrath of Tenebris is, it also gives you an opportunity to launch yet another Doombolt with significantly less damage than the one that we are assigning to our hotbar. The reason I'm even mentioning the basic Wrath of Tenebris is because the ultimate, the mythical Wrath of Tenebris, is much better. Even though we haven't been able to find it for the build as of this video, it is going to be something very important that we'll end up farming for over and over again when it comes to getting this to maximum efficiency. So the mythical version of the Wrath of Tenebris is going to do everything that the regular version does, except you're going to get more of it. So that means more chaos damage, more lifesteal, more buffs to your chaos damage pool, more health, offensive ability. You get where that's going. You're still going to get the plus 3 and plus 2 into Doombolt and Occultist, but now you're also going to get plus 2 into all of your Inquisitor skills, which is pretty great considering that we've got more than 3 of them. After that, Wrath of Tenebris, the mythical version, is going to do a bit more for us than the regular version in changing our Doombolt and another skill that we might talk about a little later on. But once you pick up the mythical Wrath of Tenebris, you're going to get an additional 80% of your weapon damage added to Doombolt. That means that 80% of the damage that you're going to do with the Wrath of Tenebris gets added on to the Doombolt damage, which is already astronomical. On top of that, Doombolt is also going to reduce targets' resistances by 25 for 5 seconds. So that in and of itself means that all of the other abilities that we just have laying on the ground all the time, like our seal and our sigil, are going to be shredding through enemies who are just clumped up that maybe didn't get deleted by the initial Doom Bolt or the second one that randomly likes to fall down. After that reduction in resistances, more importantly, it probably is going to be a 25% off the top of the energy cost for Doom Bolt. So that's 25%, meaning that you should be able to cast this ability 25% more often with even less hesitation, because your energy bar will be that much less impacted. This build can get pretty energy hungry if you are putting down a lot of sigils and a lot of seals, so having your Doom Bolt cost you less means that you're going to have to worry about it a lot less, at least for energy consumption's sake. Now, all three of those things added to Doom Bolt already are crazy, but one of the strange problems that I'm running into with this build that maybe you don't is that after I hit about level 80, I ran out of good reasons to put points into things. I couldn't find a passive that I liked. I tried summoning a Hellhound. I tried making it a little bit of a pet build to get extra damage, but the pets just kept dying too fast. Enter the Word of Renewal. Now, in the video, I'm not using the Word of Renewal, but I do have over 10 extra points of the skill variety to spend, because I can't put any more into Doom Bolt, and I don't really want to put any more into the Curse of Frailty or the Sigil of Consumption, because those are really just increasing the radius of those abilities, and they're big enough as it is. I don't really need to make them bigger. You might be asking yourself why we don't go over to the Inquisitor side of things to fill up all of the abilities over there, but those are also already maxed out with all of the points that we gain just by leveling up. So the only way to get those abilities with anything else in them is through gear. Unless we take a brand new skill in Word of Renewal, which I'm not keen to do until I get the mythical Wrath of Tenebris. The reason for this is because we're already using Blood of Dreeg, and we already have a lot of points going into it as a heal button and for all of the really good passive stats that it gives us. But if we manage to pick up a mythical Wrath of Tenebris, that is going to give us more flat chaos damage that we can add to Word of Renewal, and it is going to convert all of the piercing damage that Word of Renewal gives you into chaos damage, so we can buff our chaos damage even more ridiculously into the stratosphere, and that is really crazy. You also get another 12% attack speed to Word of Renewal. Not that we do, you know, a whole lot of relying on our auto attacks. It's not bad by any means, especially since the Wrath of Tenebris already gives you attack speed baseline. But anyway, all of that was a digression to mention that the mythical Wrath of Tenebris is going to be very important for this build, and it will ultimately open up a path for a new ability to put new points in, because I'm running out of ways to make those points work. Which is a little silly. It's a silly problem to have, but this build does so much damage. It's almost hard to part with the points that I'm collecting. You know, we're just sticking them in the bank, letting him not gather interest or get better or use them. I don't know. Is this how old rich people feel? I do have one other thing to talk about when it comes to this weapon, but it is nothing that the weapon itself does. More importantly than the more important part, is that you can actually use this at level 75. So you can go back to the last video if you haven't made it into Ultimate and just apply the Seal of the Void to everything that you were doing in that video, and you get yourself a pretty decent damage spike. So the Seal of the Void is going to add flat chaos damage, it's going to give you fire, chaos, and burn damage buffs, and it's going to convert 10% of your physical damage into chaos damage. So, all of those passive stats aside, those are exactly what we're looking for. You're getting another 4% to attack speed, which just means that Seal of the Void actually couples insanely well with the Wrath of Tenebris, and that's just kind of ridiculous. It also comes with a passive all of its own called the Burning Void, and that has a 16% chance to be used, but is in a 3-meter radius with a 3 target maximum, dealing 140% of your weapon damage, while also adding on fire and chaos damage and the ability to knock a target down for 1 second. So when a target gets knocked down, they're basically stunned for that full second, but this is exactly the damage types that we want to happen, and since it activates in a radius of just a 16% chance of anybody around us, it is pretty consistent. You'll see people falling over all the time when you hit a button thinking that that ability does not knock people down or CC anything, and you can blame that on the Seal of the Void, give him a little pat on the head, tell him he's doing a good job, and go back to what you were doing. This is the seal for you. There are plenty other seals to choose from, but I promise this is the best one for what we are going for in this build. You will also want to pick up an augment for your two-handed Wrath of Tenebris, and that one is going to be called the Potent Void Beast Powder. This one in particular is going to be buffing your vitality and chaos damage, which is, you know, damage types that we want. Even though it's not buffing them more than 100%, it's still good. But more importantly than that, you're getting 40 offensive ability from just an augment, which is a crazy amount, and considering that we want to have our OA above 3000 when we're in ultimate, that is very, very good augment territory. You can pick up that powder from the Black Legion faction once you have achieved, I think it's tier 3, which is respected status with them. Once you unlock the 3rd tab, you can go to Homestead, talk to the Black Legion Quartermaster, and purchase a couple of those Void Beast powders. You can put them on single-hand weapons too, but they will be basically halved in their effectiveness, which is the distinction between a potent and non-potent Void Beast powder. They got to double it up for the two-handed weapons because it takes up 2 slots. You see how that works. After we have completed all of this discussion on our main hand weapon and the mythical version that we're really hoping to get upgraded to, we're going to talk about our gloves. The gloves that we use in this build are called the Mythical Rift Warped Grasp, and that is a mouthful, but it is every bit worth it because these gloves come with some serious buffs to our main ability. Now, the gloves themselves are giving you buffs to Vitality, Chaos, and Vitality Decay damage, which is all par for the course, but you're getting flat health, you're getting a massive amount of offensive ability, anywhere from 116 to 172. You're getting physical resistance, anywhere from 2 to 4%, which is incredibly necessary for Ultimate as well, and you are getting Aether resistance, because that is a pretty tough stat to come by for this build, I won't lie to you. Devotions are pretty shy on the Aether resistance, and we had to use a lot of components and augments in this build to get that up to where it needed to be. So any amount that we can get from gear is a win. After all of our passive stats are done though, we're getting 2 into our Doom Bolt, which is perfect because that's freeing up points to take out that we can invest in other stuff, even though we've already stockpiled way too many. And you get +2 into Possession, which isn't exactly maxed out just yet, but we're trying. We're trying to put as many as we can in there too. After your skill upgrades from your gloves though, you are going to get a full 1.5 seconds off of the cooldown of Doom Bolt, making it much easier to cast very often. You're getting a big chunk of base damage in the Chaos variety added to your Doom Bolt as well, but seeing as how it already does a bunch of Chaos damage, creating even more at the base level is insanely important. You're also getting 15% right off the top of the energy cost of Doom Bolt, which if we had a mythical Tenebris, insert Fairly Odd Parents meme here, it would be shaving the energy cost of this ability down 40%. So the two of those things together would almost half the cost of the Doom Bolt, which is gross on so many levels, but being able to cast this for free is my ultimate wish. Anyway, the Rift Warp Grasp is going to also have some stats for Drain Essence, but since we're not using a Necromancer as our secondary build, we could just ignore it. As far as all the other stats go on this glove, or on these gloves, it's they're so good that being inefficient on the other stats that it's giving us is a completely moot point. There's no need to care. But after all of that, you'll want to put 2 more things onto your Rift Warped. I knew I was going to do it. On your Rift Warped Grasp, you're going to need to put an Unholy Inscription on for your rare component, and you are going to need Mogdrogan's Touch for your augment. Unholy Inscription is a rare component that you'll find plenty of, but it's going to give you a Vitality and Vitality K damage buffs in a really small amount, but you're going to get 15 offensive ability as well, which is just going to add on to that massive amount that the gloves are already giving us, and you're getting vitality and bleeding resistance from the inscription. And 10% vitality res with 15% bleeding res is pretty good because your bleeding resistance on this build is a little bit tough to keep up with. As of this exact moment, though, it turns out the bleeding resistance in this build is literally 85% over its maximum, so we're never going to get bled by nobody, no how. And that'll do it. But yeah, up until the point where you get all the bleeding resistance from all of the different gear that you need, it was one of the ones that I found was a little bit lower and harder to keep up with just gear. Now, that augment that I mentioned is the Mogdrogan's Touch augment, and you're going to get that from Devil's Crossing at the 4th tier of notoriety. What's it called? Reputation. Once they love you and revere you, you can pick up Mogdrogan's Touch, and this will give you a 12% poison and acid resistance, along with 9% vitality resistance. Vitality res is, by and large, not necessary, because, I mean, we've got truckloads of it just built into our kit, but the poison and acid resistance is, for all intents and purposes, just lagging behind everything else. The thing that I needed most in this build that came up the rear was elemental resistance and poison and acid resistance. Please ignore that giggity moment from 10 seconds ago and focus on the resistances. If you haven't purchased yourself a writ for all of the factions that you need to farm augments for back in Elite, I highly recommend doing so as soon as possible, because those writs are increasing your reputation gain, which means that you can get to these augments and tier 4 stuff quicker with all of your town buddies. So do it, it'll make your life easier, and it'll make Ultimate as a whole much easier when it comes to the point where you are trying to get the maximum efficiency out of this build to start pushing it through the Shattered Realm or the Crucible, or doing whatever you want, maybe Nemesis farming or Pinnacle boss farming, what have you. But get those boys maxed out, buy those writs, get that reputation going. It's important, don't ignore it. After you have completed the glove search, you may have found a pair of pants by the name of the Demon Bone leg plates. Specifically, the mythical Demon Bone leg plates come with almost 1800 armor, and they are going to be giving you physical and chaos damage buffs with some internal trauma damage, but you're going to be getting a hefty chunk of defensive ability, a percentage increase to defensive ability, and you're getting pierce and vitality resistance along with some reduced stun duration. All of the resistances on these pants are crazy good. You're also increasing your armor by a percentage from 8 to 12%, so basically your armor absorption, or the damage that your armor is going to mitigate, is going to get much better because of these pants. We can even, at the end of the day, throw on a component to make that armor absorption even better, but that's more going to be a preference for you. I don't necessarily think that I need to go over 70%, but we can definitely get it up much higher if we want to, albeit sacrificing a little bit of our bleeding and pierce resistance to do so. Anyway, after all of those passive stats, these pants, the Demon Bone leg plates, are giving you a +2 to Curse of Frailty, which is increasing the radius of that ability, and we've got that on our right click, which is ultimately reducing the defensive ability of things that have the spell on them while making them walk slow. And we're going to get +2 into Soleil's Witchfire, which is our always active passive ability, and that bad boy is maxed out as well. So that's where our big chunk of our flat chaos damage is coming from, along with a lot of attack speed and boost to vitality and vitality decay damage. It's just good all around. These pants do fill in some of the gaps for our non-Doombolt abilities, and that is very much appreciated. They also have a 30% chance when you get hit to activate in a 3-meter target area a big shockwave of chaos damage, and who doesn't love dealing chaos damage out of the zipper of your pants? When you gotta do a poot, you put on these pants, it comes out in chaos, everybody explodes all around you, even if they're demons. They just can't handle the chaotic stench of the Demon Bone leg plates. After you have these pants, though, you're going to want to equip them with the Silk Swatch if you're not going for that extra armor absorption, and you are going to get 18% pierce resistance along with 18% bleeding resistance because of just that component. After you've done that, you're going to go and get yourself another Mugdrogan's Touch from the Devil's Crossing Quartermaster, so you can get another 12% poison and acid resistance with 9% vitality resistance. Second part's not as important as the first part. You know that you need that poison res because apparently nobody has built up any kind of tolerance after the Grim Dawn has happened. Now, I know that we are hitting the gear super hard, but since we're hitting all of the gear, all of the components, and all of the augments all at once, I think it's a little bit fair that this video runs a little bit longer than the normal stuff. So I want to talk about the shoulders and the belt next, because these two things are going to be... one's going to be easy to find, one's going to be a lot harder to find. But since that's the case, we'll start with shoulders, which are incredibly easy to find. You are going to need to grind your way all the way up to the Loghorrean in Ultimate, so you're going to have to kill the mythical version of that big bad boy, but once he dies, he's going to give you his monster infrequent shoulders, and if they're not the type of resistances that you're looking for, you can just go back and farm that boy over and over and over again and keep getting these shoulders until you get the rolls that you want. So specifically, these shoulders are going to give you a % increase to spirit. They are going to give you a flat health bump. You are going to get % increases to both offensive and defensive ability. Your health regen is going to get buffed, and you're going to get another health regen increase in the form of a % increase, anywhere from 11 to 13%. After that, you'll get physical resistance. You'll also get chaos resistance, and most importantly, as one of our least loved resistances in this build, elemental resistance. If you're not familiar, elemental resistance gives you the percentage that it's showing across all three of lightning, fire, and cold resistances evenly. So if you get a 29% elemental resist on these shoulders, you're good. That's a huge chunk of resistance to 3 stats, and that in and of itself is just like perfectly efficient. After that, though, you're getting +3 points into Doombolt and +3 points into Flames of Ignifar if you guys wanted to deviate into the Ignifar avenue. So that exists. But more importantly, we want the 3 to Doombolt. Doombolt's the big ability. That's what we're after. The component that you will need to farm both the recipe and the materials for is going to be the Spell Scorched Plating. This particular component is a bit of a pain to craft, but once you craft it, you're going to get a flat 100 health to your base pool. You're going to get 20% pierce resistance, which is nice and easy, and you're going to get 15% elemental resistance. So if you manage to roll a full 29% elemental res on these shoulders, you can add in Another 15%, getting you up to 44 to make this almost half of what you need as far as elemental resistances go in just one item. Well, it would be half in normal, but in ultimate it's definitely less because we got some negative numbers in there. But who wants to do math right now? We're not talking about that. The shoulders are done. Let's talk about the belt. The belt is the mythical sash of the Bloodlord, and this one is pretty cool. Not only are the passive stats really cool, but it's giving you +4 to Doombolt. And in a belt, having +4 to anything feels real good. Now, as far as the passive stats go, you're actually getting an increase to crit damage, which is insane because our kit already has a lot of built-in activation for crits, and when Doombolt hits, it is also dealing increased crit damage on its own from the ability itself and all of the other things that we have been funneling into it, like our devotions and so on. So getting another 6 to 8% extra crit damage off of a belt is nuts. Now, this belt is also going to do one other thing that may seem bad at first, but I promise you is very good. It has a conversion on 2 different damage types, and both of them are very important to our build. So it's got a fire damage conversion and a vitality damage conversion, and both of those damage types are getting converted into chaos. So you can get anywhere from 40 to 60% of their damage converted to chaos, meaning that we are basically critical mass on our chaos damage. We're almost nuclear at this point with all of our void-powered red lightning of doom. Past that conversion, though, you're getting a flat bump to spirit. You're also getting a % increase to spirit, which is gross as well, and a large chunk of offensive ability. It's almost on the same tier as our gloves with as much as you're getting. Beyond that, you are going to be looking at yet another 23 to 30% vitality res, which is kind of, it's there. And your bleeding res is going to be anywhere from 29 to 43%. So this belt is going to help you out in the bleeding resistance department by quite a bit. The belt also comes with a neat little skill that activates on a 20% chance when you get hit in a 5.5 meter target area, and you are going to get a big flash of vitality damage, which converts entirely into health to go along with your chaos farts. So you've got your chaos farts, now you've got your vitality farts. All we need is potentially a fire fart. Your components and your augments on the belt are going to be, number 1, Mogdrogan's Touch for the augment. It's going to be useful in all the armor that you have because it can be applied to all armor, and we want that poison and acid resistance up. The component, however, is another one of those that is a little bit difficult to farm because you need a whole bunch of Ugden Bloom, which is annoying to get, but once you farm it up, you will be using the Ugdenbog Leather to get yourself a 30 bonus to defensive ability, along with 20% poison and acid resistance, with 20% bleeding resistance. Our bleeding resistance at this point is so overmaxed because of our components and our gear just passively throwing it at us, like it's dollar bills or something, that I was worried about it a little while ago, and suddenly I'm not. So that's how good the belt is. Now, there are exactly 3 more pieces of gear that I think require some farming to get, but are still incredibly potent for this build. At least one of them will probably be replaced in terms of maximum efficiency for our damage going forward, but that's going to require a lot of farming, and while I've got some plans for Nemesis farming for a lot of my builds, we'll talk about that when we get there. So, that being said, let's kick it off with the amulet, and that is going to be the mythical Tainted Ruby of Gardal. This has a built-in passive of its own. It's giving us +3 to Soleil's Witchfire and +1 to all skills in Inquisitor. That alone is enough for me to put it on just for the damage bump to that base chaos from Soleil's Witchfire, but having +1 to Deadly Aim and Inquisitor Seal is another really good factor. This is also giving us buffs to Chaos and Elemental damage, and if you remember, Elemental includes Fire, of which we are very accommodating in this build, and it is going to convert physical damage to Chaos damage as well. Anywhere from 8 to 12% physical damage gets converted. You're going to take 8% less damage from Chthonian enemies, while getting 4 to 6% of your offensive ability buffed up naughtily. And you're getting Pierce and Bleeding resistance, which is just all the more reason to say, look at that bleeding resistance. Do I even really need this component for the Silk Swatch? Maybe I do want that armor absorption. But that's the best part about Ultimate. That's the best part about getting 2 builds at this stage of the game. You really get to see all the pieces working together and then mix and match to just make the thing work as best as it possibly can. Now, the passive that comes with this amulet is called the Flame of Gardal. It activates in a 6-meter target area, and it's just gonna always be doing fire and chaos damage while converting 10% of that damage into health. The radius is also going to slow targets by 25%, but it's ultimate, so a lot of them have slow resistances or at least ways to get on top of you. Namely, Yetis are really awful. They do block each other a lot, which is nice. If you can find a little choke point, you may have noticed it. But Yetis are incredibly annoying. They just run at you. Same with like Flesh Hulks. They just have dashes to get right on top of your stupid face and big health bars to get through, making them just an absolute monstrous pain in the tutor. But all that being said, the passive on this amulet is still really, really great and should be, well, I'd say about 50% of the reason that you take it. It's just that good. Now, as far as the components and the augments go for this amulet, you'll want to use Aether Soul, because you'll remember that Aether resistance is something that we sorely need. And Aether Soul is going to give you 6% less damage from Ethereals and Ethereal Corruptions. Nice and easy damage reduction there, along with 30 defensive ability and 16% Aether Res. If you watched the last video, you'll know from our metal that we have the same components on there, so having 2 of these bad boys means 12% less damage from Ethereals and Ethereal Corruptions, with a whopping 32% Aether Resistance. Pretty nutty. We're also going to pick up the Survivor's Ally Augment, and that you'll also be getting from Devil's Crossing at Tier 4, but this is just it's a bonus to all pets that we don't particularly need, but more importantly, it is adding a 12% elemental resistance to your character. So even though you don't have pets, and you're not using half of this augment, the other half is good enough to warrant getting it and putting it on the amulet right away. After our amulet is done, though, we're going to make our way over to our chest piece, and that is the Fate Weaver's Raymond. The Raymond is it's only accessible at level 94, meaning that you're only going to get it in Ultimate, and you'll probably have to do a little bit of farming to do that. But the big reason that we want this one is because of the passive aura that comes around with it. It's called Prismatic Aura, and it activates in a 15-meter radius to give you 5% physical resistance, 15% pierce resistance, 15% poison and acid resistance, 15% vitality resistance, 15% aether resistance, 15% chaos, 15% elemental, and 15% bleeding resistance. It gives you 15% resistant to freaking everything except physical res, which is 5%, and it gives you no increase to reduced stun duration, which is a little bit of a bummer. I'll be honest. But everything else gets a 15% increase. That's freaking nutty, and it is totally worth it, considering that a lot of those reses are overmaxed now just because of this chest piece, I think that that is a win. The other passive stats that come with this are Aether and Elemental damage, along with Burn, Frostburn, and Electrocute damage. Elemental being the only one that we really need, because none of those other damage types are specifically laid out in our kit. But you're getting a % increase to Spirit, which is increasing our magical damage anyway, and we're getting a flat health increase along with energy regen, which is just a lot of good to have stats. They're not bad, they're not great, they're good. You're also getting a deflect chance increase of anywhere from 3 to 5%, so you're going to be able to dodge projectiles. Is it? I think dodge is the one that avoids projectiles. And deflect. Nope, I think that's right. I think deflect is projectiles. Whatever it is, you can read it right there on the item. It says avoid projectiles. You're getting another 2 to 4% physical resistance to add onto the 5% that the aura is giving you, so that's even better. The cap for physical resistance is going to be 40% when it comes to ultimate, so any little bit that you can get for physical resistance is going to be exponentially more useful than any other resistance. It's also slapping a big old chunk of chaos resistance on there. Not that it's necessarily important, but with that being said, we are about 35% overmaxed on chaos resistance, meaning that those chaos boys just can't touch us. Your Fate Weaver Raymond, though, is not going to have an augment unless you find one specifically that you really like. I am still walking down that road, so we'll get there, talk about it when we do. But the component that we'll want is the Hallowed Ground. Hallowed Ground is a rare component you'll pick up, and this is going to give you plus 25 to defensive ability, along with plus 2% of that amount, or of your entire amount of defensive ability, meaning that that 25 that you just got is already feeding into the 2% that you're getting next. And you're getting health regenerated per second of 30. More importantly than all those things, though, you're getting elemental resistance of 12% by just activating this component, and that should get us nice and up over the hurdle of the 80% mark. If you're not aware, when you go into Ultimate, you want to be having all of these resistances overmaxed, because a lot of the enemies, well, the big bad enemies, have ways to reduce them all. So make sure that you've got extra, so when you are reduced, you're not reduced below your 80%, if that makes sense. And then lastly, the final item I want to talk about is the mythical worm scale foot guards. These boots are I'm only really after a couple things with them. The fire damage that they do, or that they're buffing, is really helpful. The offensive ability and defensive ability that they're giving you is also insanely helpful. You're getting a big chunk of movement speed off of them, just baseline, which is really nice. And they come with elemental resistance. So, I mean, this thing is just checking box after box after box. The trouble is that the points, the ability that you're getting points into with these boots is Aura of Censure, and that is an Inquisitor skill that conflicts with Possession because it is also an exclusive skill, meaning that all the points that we can get out of these boots are entirely wasted. We're not using Thermite Mine, no Storm Totem, no Aura of Censure, no Smite. None of that is working, so that is that makes me unhappy. But those resistances are super worth it, and this is going to give us a very big chunk of stat that we have been missing super hard up to this point, and that is our reduced stun duration. These boots alone are giving us anywhere from 40 to 60% reduced stun duration, and before I put the boots on, I had 0. So when we got stunned, we were stunned for a lifetime. But now that we got the boots, that is fixed. Problem mostly solved. We could probably farm up some other components to max it out at the 80%, but right now 65 makes me pretty happy. The boots also come with a 100% chance of activating their special ability, which goes on a 15-second cooldown, but gives you a 10,000 damage absorption shield, which protects you from elemental and bleeding resistance. That shield also gives you fire retaliation of about 700, but basically any damage that is elemental or bleeding has to get through that 10,000 point shield in order to do damage to you at all. So it's pretty good. These are really, really good boots, and any build that is in requirement or desperate need of defensive options should start looking at these, because these things are nutty. Now, after all of the boot passive talk is done, the only component that we're putting on them is the Mark of the Traveler, and that's just because I didn't have a Mark of Mogdrogen crafted up to put on there. But Mark of the Traveler is giving us increased health regen, 8% to movement speed, and 15% slow resistance. So since the boots are already giving us 9% move speed, we add another 8% on there, and we're just zooming all over the place with our speed boots on. That is it. That is all of the components that I think are important, all of the augments that I think are important, all of the gear that I think is important. Couple honorable mentions as far as components go. We have got the runestone in our cap doing aether and elemental resistance ups. We have got 2 frozen hearts in our rings, which are increasing our cold res that we don't really need, but they're reducing freeze and petrify duration by 21%, which is a pretty good chunk of anti-CC. So I think they're good, but they do have room to be changed once we start really slicing into maximum efficiency on this build. But that is going to be it for this build in this video, guys. I will be back next week, and we're actually going to start doing some farm guide videos, but I'll save the details for that until we get there. Thanks so much for hanging out, especially if you made it through all 4 parts of this video. You are my favorite type of person. I'll see you next time. Peace out.